So this is the intensive writer boot camp. So I want you to be prepared for a lot of information coming at you really quickly. Okay. And I do want to have enough time to answer any questions afterwards. Adair needs to be made host so he can share the screen. So if you have any questions, please write them down and be prepared to let me know, because I'll take questions all at once at the end. Okay. And I just want to let you know that I'm very excited to be presenting this information to you. Okay. So therefore, let's talk about this. This is the Writers Bootcamp for FaithCon 2021, as you know. Okay. And this is very important. Our first section is really for all about fiction, guys, because we are a faith-based publishing company, but keep in mind that our go-to right now is the fiction genre. We do a lot of nonfiction publication as well, but hey, it's all about reaching people for God, and doing that, we want to use the tools that entertain as well as the tools that can teach, okay? So we're all about writing. So the first section, the next slide there, is fiction, and we're going to talk about what kind of writer are you. All right. So there are three different types of writers. There are two that I like to highlight, but the third type is actually a mixture of both. Okay, that's the type of writer that you want to be. So you can either be a plotter, you could be a pantser, or you can be a little bit of both. So we'll talk about the pantser first. The pantser is how I am. It's how I am, and it's how Adair is. Adair is a pantser. But we do have Misha, however, in Renee, she's a plotter. So she were on, she would tell you that she does a lot of the plotting for her books. She wants to outline it first and get a lot of detail first. So the pantser writes literally by the seat of their pants. That means that you're led by your imagination. You're all about just being in the moment and feeling like writing. Okay, it goes a lot by feeling and a lot by inspiration. All of a sudden something will come on and it'll inspire you to get writing. You really feel like you need to get this information down, or this will be a good idea for a book, or this will be good to add to a book. That's a pantser, and you want to write it right now. Like, you don't want to lose it, and you know you'll lose it if you don't get it down. And when you write it down, it's just free-flowing writing, okay? And being a pantser is great because you're inspired by everything around you and by people in your life, and that's awesome. But however, it can be annoying because it's not under your complete and utter control. So those are the cons of being a pantser. Being a pantser means is that you're controlled by the stimuli that inspires you to write. So this is, a lot of people experience a lot of writer's block, and I can't slow down because I'm already 16 minutes in. So this is where people experience a lot of writer's block. This is where people experience a lot of trouble advancing their stories because they're pantsers and they can't get it done. They were inspired last week, but this week they're not. Okay, so I'm not at the next screen yet, Adair. So I'm still a pantser plotter. So let's go back to the previous slide. It says plotter, pantser, plotter. Adair, can you move us back to the previous slide? So we're not into plotting yet. There we go. So being a pantser means that you're just moved by the moment, okay? Being a plotter means that you need to be organized. You have to have structure. So you need an outline. And being a plotter is great because then you want to organize your story to the end detail, which makes it very easy to write from at that point. But please understand something about being a plotter. Plotters are not much moved by inspiration. Therefore, you can fall tail to a very boring story, a very scripted story, and your danger of your characters not taking all of their own, right? So what you have me having here is that you need to be a little bit of both. You need a pantser and a plotter. You need to be somebody who knows how to organize and outline your story, but at the same time, you are the writer that can use what's around you to stimulate and to inspire you to add to your character and let them take on their own life. If you're a fiction writer and your characters don't take on a personality in your head, it's a very dangerous place to be, because they have to have several things to build this character, including a backstory. And whether you write the entire backstory or not, they need to be more than just this two-dimensional character you have on paper. They've got to be like a living person. There are so many details to people we meet every day, and a lot of those details we don't even know. There's a backstory to, you meet someone on the street, they seem interesting, or someone that's very attractive, or someone that's very nice, and you want to get to know this person. They seem engaging, but the truth is they've got a whole life that happened before the moment they met you. Okay. And there are several things that made that person. And in order for you to understand who this person is, you may need to go into some details of their life, but you don't need to know their entire life story. That's the same thing with your characters in your book. There are elements that are seen and unseen that have to be determined for your character in the background for them to take on real life. Otherwise, it is two-dimensional cookie cutter type of personality. You want your characters to be living and just like someone you meet on the street, because they're put in here to aspire. They should take on their own life and become their own people. So let's talk about how you become a plotter, a pantser, and a little bit of both. I'm a pantser by nature, so I'm inspired by what's around me and the people I meet by nature. But I've determined to use some tools that will allow me to become a little bit of both to organize my writing. And in order to do that, we'll go into the plotting piece, which is the next slide. Now, in order for me to become a little bit of a plotter, even though I'm mostly a pantser, I have to employ certain things or tools. And one of them is what I call a character fact list. Now, the character fact list is a spreadsheet that I use. We're next slide, Derek. Can you move it forward for me? The character fact list is the character that we use to is a spreadsheet that we use to list important details about our character. So you're talking about eye color, height, something very interesting, the hair. You're talking about, these details that'll come across eventually in your writing that you need to make sure that you don't forget. They can't be blue-eyed in the front of the book and then they have brown eyes at the back. They can't have long hair and then have short hair. They have, what I mean? These are details that are really important. And if your novel is 60 to 70,000 pages, at some point, you're going to continue to have to reference these characteristics of your character. So the character fact list will list your character, their age, their birthday, date of birth. That's important. And I also list, what flaw, because it's important that your characters are flawed. All of your characters are human. They're people. So you want to make sure that they come across as such and not as some kind of alien or a perfect creature. No one is perfect. And you want to make the flaw as engaging and as human as personal, as possible. For example, in the Brainwaver series, the very first book, Wavering Minds, Celine has a flaw. She's a little bit of a person that is kind of, of course, the word is slipping my mind right now, but she's obsessive compulsive, and she's obsessive with her rug and how this rug keeps coming up under her feet, but she doesn't want to tack it down because she doesn't want to be crooked, so she's afraid she'll tack it down crooked. So instead she keeps tripping over this beautiful rug that she bought because so it's constantly got to be straight. And so she's got this flaw of this, she fixates on these certain things, and it's got to be straight, but I don't want to tack it down because it'll be crooked, and it makes her just a little bit ridiculous, So you've got a scene where, she's driving in the very beginning of the book, and all of it, she's in a rush, and she's noting all of the details of why her commute is suddenly an issue, the cobblestone streets, the tie-dye bus in her way. Really? A tie-dye bus? That's what we're doing, nuns in the way, things like that. She's kind of fixating on things that to her are inconvenience, but she could just easily take a different route, or she could just not be running late. So these are the things that you bring out these imperfections in your character to make them human. It's important that your reader identifies with who they're reading about. Okay. And second of all, when you use the character fact list, you want to make sure that you notate whether this is a protagonist, an antagonist, a comic relief character. What is their role in the book? Because you don't want to forget their role or what they're bringing to. In the Hater's Prayer series under C. Marie Evans, one of my comic relief characters, even though their book is not going to be very comical at all, is Charmaine. And so Charmaine starts out the Hater's Prayer with just a lot of just really blaring personality traits, just kind of obnoxious. She's obnoxious, but she's hilarious. She's a perfect foil for Naomi, who is very responsible, respectable, and calm. So she balances Naomi's nature, who is the main character, with her outbursts and her ridiculousness. And she gives Naomi a target for her get it together type of attitude. So that's why that's perfect together. So you want to make sure you use your character fact list to list the role. So we're talking about the age, birthday, the role, the height, the eye color. All of these important details are listed in your character fact list. And this will help you, and I promise you it will help you in the future to make sure that your character is consistent throughout the book. Again, your reader is not patient. Once they've engaged this character as a certain way in their mind, and keep in mind, you're outlining just the frame of your character. The actual way your character appears, that's your reader's imagination that takes shape. For example, I have a character in the Waver My Sisters series called The Little Editor, and he lives in Celine's head. So for me, the little editor looks like James Jameson from Spider-Man, with the cigar and like the shaved head kind of look, and always with the little mustache or whatever. That's kind of what he looks like with some glasses on and a visor. But Adair shared with me that to him, the little editor looks very different. Someone else explained to me, I think it was Adair, maybe that it's a cartoon. What was the cartoon called? What was the cartoon? It was what was it?
Inside Out. That was it. Yeah, that's it.
Inside Out.
Yeah.
Inside Out. Yeah. And so he said the little editor looks like the character, or the angry character from that cartoon. And so and I thought that was so cute. That's adorable. But we had two very different visions based on the outline of what the little editor looks like in the book. So keep in mind that that's what your reader does. Reader reads it, and then in their imagination it takes on a shape. So your job is to outline your character and give it shape, not to be too detailed about who your character is. But they're very unforgiving if you say your character has brown eyes at the beginning of the book, and then you say, and then she stared into his beautiful blue eyes and wondered. Yeah, they're going to be upset with that. They're going to be impatient. As a reader, I've actually stopped reading books because of that. Because they've lost the character somewhere along the way. So you want to make sure that you keep this information organized for you to refer to consistently when you go back and forth. Next, so these are the ways that you want to organize and create your character. Now, outlining is very important. For pantsers, we don't like outlines, buddy. We don't like them at all. We just want to sit down and we just want to write, and we want to go how we flow. And our characters tend to take on life, so they tend to want to write their own story. But when I have allowed my characters to just write my own story, they have written me into a wall. And they've written me into a place where I could not follow the kind of story that would engage a reader, keep the reader engaged, and then get me to the final conflict. So I had to discipline my characters and give them structure. So what I've done is I have an agreement with my characters in the background. I tell my characters, okay, this is what we're doing here. Listen, you can do whatever you want to do. You just got to get me to this point here. And it's a point that I've predetermined in an outline or a plotted format. And I'm going to explain that format to you in a second. But I've predetermined that this is where we're going. Okay, this is the next area of conflict, area of no return. I'll explain to you what those things are. This is the next conflict area or whatever. I need you to get me here. Okay, so you can do whatever you want, but get me to this resolution, right? So that's what I have this little deal with my characters. So they do. And this way the characters are alive, they're authentic, they're dynamic. They kind of take on a life of their own in the writing, but I still get to where I need to get to continue to advance my story. Okay. So let's talk about the story itself. Let's talk about plotting this story and what we're dealing with. Now that you know, you've got to determine if you're a pantser or plotter, and that the best thing to do is to be a little bit of both. If you're a pantser, learn how to organize your information in a way that works for you. And if you're a plotter, learn how to allow your characters to take on life and become dynamic. Be very real people. They can't be cookie cutter people. They've got to have dimensions. So you've got to be very good at creating backstories if you're just a plotter, to be sure that you capture this person, all of their dimensions and all of their variousness. And again, also make sure that that person is flawed. Okay. So we're going into now organizing your story. We've done that. Fact list and outline. Let's talk about the outline part. When you outline your story, be sure to put it in stages. And we're going to talk about those stages because what engages a reader? Well, if you'll notice, most movies are written in what we call a 3-act structure. I like to use the example of Die Hard. Like, everyone's seen Die Hard. It's a great movie with Bruce Willis. It's an old movie, but everyone's seen it. And it's basically a 3-act structure movie. You've got McClane in the beginning, and the issue is McClane has a wife and they're estranged. And there's a Christmas party, and now you've got this internal conflict of McClane wanting to be the man that she wants him to be, trying to get their marriage back together, but not really knowing how to be anything other than what he is. And you've got this external conflict of these terrorists or what have you that are taking over the building. Okay, so McClane is there, and in the first act you see him and Holly meet, and you see what he's going through and the fact that he wants to be a part of her life. And then in the next act you see, and then of course you get to this point of no return, because in the next act you've got these terrorists or at the end of that act, the terrorists are coming in, entering in, locking down the building and taking over. And so that's the first act. And then in the second act you've got how McClane has to deal with it. He has to make a choice. How to deal with this situation. And so in this act, McClane has to decide to be who he is, and that is fight. He's a fighter. I'm going to have to find a way to resolve this to save my wife and all of these people. So his goal first is to get the police involved. If I can just get the local police involved, get them the information they need, I can get them to take over. And so he does everything he can to keep the terrorists at bay while he's trying to get the local police involved and to get this matter settled. But that fails because whoever the commissioner is, he's not working with him, and only a police officer on the street is working with him. And you know that police officer, he becomes Carl Winslow from Family Matters or whatever. But anyway, long story short, you've got this situation. Now he's working on resolving it. What happens now? Well, what happens now is, unfortunately, you're going into the act of him meeting up with several different challenges and several different, he's losing ground. He's meeting up with these terrorists and trying to get the police involved, and he's having to fight it out with them. And then he steps on a whole bunch of glass and and it's just, his feet are damaged. So you've got all of these conflicting things going on as he's just trying to get a resolution that doesn't involve direct contact with the terrorists, okay? But then you get into the third act where he has to have direct contact because everyone's taken to the roof and they're going to blow the roof. And so it's nothing like the terrorists have promised. They're not going to let anyone go. They were going to kill everyone and hopefully let everyone make the assumption that they died in this conflict. And so now you have the character trying to determine whether he's going to live or die, and he's got to fight and still be himself. He's resolving external conflict, and this is the final scene, the final end scene. That's the big scene. So that's what you've been writing the whole time to get to, is this big scene. So this is the 3-act structure that most movies and books follow. So when you write, the easiest way to write your novel or write your book is in a 3-act structure. So you've got, you've got your setup, then you've got your mirror moments, and then you've got your final scene. Okay. And so we'll talk about those pillars of no return and things like that in just a second. So let's talk about your first scene when you're setting it up. Your first scene is to set up your book. Keep in mind, your plot is like the vehicle that carries your reader through your story. If your book is like a road, then your plot is the car that they're driving on that road to get from point A to point B to point C. Okay. So this is the plot. This is carrying your reader. The plot is made up of scenery. It's made up of, location. It's made up of these tools here that we are going over. And so we're going to talk about the point of no return and the first scene. So the first scene is your setup scene. The setup scene is all about you making a decision on how you're going to progress this reader. Okay, this reader, this is where the reader, you get to know who, the reader gets to know who your character is, and they get to know who is instrumental in the characters' lives. So they get to meet everybody in the first scene. You get to introduce the roles. This is where your character fact list comes in, and you talk about the roles or what have you. Believe it or not, I never introduced the antagonist until like the 4th chapter. I'm still in the first scene, but I'm in the 4th chapter, and that's when I introduce the antagonist. I always introduce my reader first because the truth of the matter is that you need to have conflict. Let's talk about conflict a little bit. Let's talk about what kind of conflict. You have 2 kinds of conflict. You have internal conflict. You have external conflict. Okay. And I got to tell you, just like Plotter and Pantser, it's a good thing to mix the 2. The best thing to do is to do both. Is to have internal and external. That makes for a better story when you have internal and external conflict. So let's talk about what that is. Internal conflict, what is that? Internal conflict is a person who has to resolve something within themselves. Usually, especially for faith-based, for us, we have a lot of internal conflict with our characters in our daily life. We have to decide whether or not we're going to compromise. For some people in their lives right now, people who have decided not to take the vaccine, right, for their jobs for COVID, they have to resolve within themselves whether or not they're going to quit their jobs that require it and look for something new, or whether they're going to take a stand for those and say, this is not right. You should not be able to tell me what I can do with my body. Or they, they have to figure out how they're going to resolve it. And the way they resolve it first is within themselves, because they have to argue within themselves whether or not they're going to cave. Am I going to cave, or am I going to give in to the requirement, or am I going to not give in? And if I don't comply, what does that mean? That's internal conflict. Am I going to comply, or am I not going to comply? Okay. So the external conflict would be the fact that, we will introduce you into a situation where you have to comply. So you either have to comply and get the vaccine, or you must leave this job. That's the external conflict. It will suspend you without pay, or will terminate you indefinitely. You can't return to work here, or what have you. You don't even have the option. This is for those who don't have the option to get tested. because there's some that say, well, or you could just get tested every week or whatever. But there are many that don't have that option. Either take the vaccine or go. Okay. So situations and circumstances, guys, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with conflict. Your book is more exciting when you've got both present. If you're missing conflict, if it's only one, it can still be moving. There's some very moving books without external conflict, with all just internal ones. But again, it's really hard for your reader to stay engaged. Okay, so you want both. You want there to be an enemy within and an enemy without. That's how I explain internal and external conflict. Okay, so now let's talk points of no return. Okay, so you've got this scene, and you're introducing your characters, you're making your fact list, you know what their roles are, you've introduced these people into your storyline, and you do so with their behavior. You'll get to a point in your storyline where the reader must go forward, okay? Like he cannot go back. He must make a decision that moves him forward to the next story. It must be impossible for him to go back once he makes this choice. So that is indicative of, so for say, Emery, she read a book, or actually we helped her write this book, the first one, which was is Allowed to Cheat When Marriage Takes a Wrong Turn. And in the book, when we took her memoir and her journals and we're changing it into a fiction story kind of setup, the first thing we've done is we consider what's the point of no return for her. And the point of no return for her was a place where I've been 13 years in this marriage and I've decided it is time to let myself get out of it and be free. And so she has to make a decision that cannot, when you make it, it's really not a reversible decision. Like, it's impacted everyone so greatly that if you try to reverse it, it will cause a lot of suffering either way. So you got to really decide which is going to suffer and which way is the better. And so that's a point of no return. So when you set up your story, your character has to come to a point of no return where they must go forward and they cannot go backward. Okay, and that usually comes after type of conflicting scene. Okay, so again, we want to make sure that you introduce a lot of conflict into your book. We want to make sure that you introduce a lot of challenges in your book. So this is the challenge moment, and they've met up with a challenge moment, and they've got to go forward. Okay, and when they often go forward, sometimes they lose ground, and you want to make sure that that's okay. It's okay because it's human, and that's what we do. They lose ground, but they must move forward, and this transitions them into the second scene. That's that point of no return. That's that pillar that separates the scenes. They have to go forward. For John McClane, it was deciding that, hey, I want to get the law enforcement involved, but then he engaged the terrorist himself and realized that it's not going to be easy to get law enforcement involved. Do I give up or do I keep going until I can find resolution? That's when he got to the point of no return, and then he goes into the second scene. Okay, so now your second scene of your novel is no longer introduction. Now we know everyone. This is the meat of the action. This is where the majority of your book takes place, and what is buried within it is called the mirror moment. The mirror moment, guys, is when your character has to come to a realization of truth to themselves. They must either grow or die. And it's very important. Some way they're going to grow or they're going to die as a character. Either they're going to somehow benefit from what they've just done, or live their life, or how they live. They're going to decide to change, and somehow live, or they're going to decide not to change and therefore die. Okay, so let me give you an example of that. Let's say there's an alcoholic. You say your character is an alcoholic, and they have to meet up with a certain person in their life. They're married. And the wife says, if you don't do this, if you don't get help, I'm leaving you. This is the This is the conflict. This is the mirror moment where the character has to look at themselves and decide, am I going to change who I am so that my marriage can live? Or am I going to stay the way I am and lose? I'm going to lose my marriage and it's going to die. So that's what we call death stakes, guys. Every book has to have death stakes. Something's got to die, whether it's an emotional death, whether it's a physical death, whether it's a financial death, whatever. Those are death stakes. Death stakes have to be present in your novel. Okay, if your character doesn't stand to lose or die somehow, I don't want to read the book. Right? So whether it's if it's a romance novel, then it's an emotional death. Whether they're going to be able to progress or not emotionally, are they going to have that HEA, what we call a happily ever after? That's important. Okay, that's the kind of thing we're looking at, and you're getting to the mirror moment where they decide, am I going to change or die? That's always buried in the second scene, and what the second scene is shaped around in your novel. It's shaped around your main character. So for Naomi in the Hater Sprayer, her mirror moment was, okay, am I going to allow myself to be happy after I go through this divorce? I'm in the middle of this divorce. I've got these 3 kids to raise. I've come to the realization that my friend, who's been my friend forever, is telling me that he wants more. And I've got to make a decision about that. Am I going to allow myself to move forward and be happy? Or am I going to just be gun shy on relationships and just not have one because I was hurt so badly with this husband? You know, Naomi has a serious internal conflict that she has to resolve before her and Vic can move forward. And believe it or not, she makes the wrong choice in certain aspects of the book, but ends up, of course, making the right choice for her. And if you read it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But that's the thing about mirror moments. They have to come to a place where they look at themselves and they see who they really are, and understand, I need to change or I need to die. Something's gonna die. Okay. And then you've got your final scene, the third act, which is where you've got your big action scene, where either you got your fight scene or you've got the big resolution somehow, but it's giant, it's huge, it's exciting, and it's the final conflict, and it brings them to a place where they have to win. They have to win or they're dead. They're dead meat. And the truth is, like I said, in this instance, most books, especially if you're dealing with a romance, have HEAs, happily ever afters. They end up winning no matter what they were going through. Guys, I'm telling you, I won't lie to you, I prefer HEAs. I've read books that don't have a happily ever after, and I've thrown them. I've literally thrown, like, I read this one book where this woman and her family were, this one woman was going around and she's trying to help people who are plagued by these demons, and her job was to bring the family into understanding who they were, that they were under demonic attack, and that they had a way to be saved, and so it was her job. She was driven by these demons and angels to try to help these people get to a resolution. And so she would go to the house, and so it's a whole family involved, and in the end the whole family ends up demon possessed. And I threw the book. I was so mad. I threw the book. I was like, no, I don't want to read a book where everyone loses in the end. That stinks. Who wants to read that? So please don't write that kind of book. If you write, my encouragement is to definitely write a book that can engage and excite and have your reader go through the emotional angst that the character's going through, but end up in a happy place. Life is depressing all by itself, guys. I don't want to read a book that's going to end up depressed. So that's really the plot of your novel. That is what you've outlined, and you've got 3 pillars of no return, each one, or 2 pillars of no return, each set up in a place in your novel. One that transitions from the first scene into the middle scene where the mirror moment is, and then you've got the pillar of no return that transitions into the final scene or the fight scene where the death stakes are made clear and your character lives or dies. Okay, so that's the basic way that a fiction novel is set up. And so now you've got those things. Let's progress to the next slide. where we can discuss what is after plotting. These are tools, guys. These are tools that you use when you're writing your book, okay? It says bow. It shouldn't say bow. It should say now. But now, night owl worries. Night owl worries appeal to and they engage your reader. What is your reader concerned about? What are they worried? Are they worried about falling in love or being alone for the rest of their lives? Are they worried about financial crisis and making right choices financially? Are they worried about what are the night owl worries of your reader? Because that's what your book is going to appeal to. So for me, the night owl worries are salvation, and the night owl worries are, living up to your purpose. And the night owl worries are, of course, for me, it's romance a lot. So I write a lot of romantic fiction, but it's not romantic. It's more suspenseful, maybe a little bit, but it has romantic elements. So you see the pictures of the Hater's Prayer, because that one is probably the truest romance book I have. Wavering Minds is very close in the romance sector, but it's really more sci-fi and suspense than romance. Both deal with two very serious night owl worries. With Hater's Prayer, the night owl worry is whether we're going to end up alone or not. I thought I found the person that I would be with for the rest of my life, and it turns out I didn't. And now what? What does that mean for me? So this is something that will appeal to readers who have that same night owl worry. Or you have Wavering Minds. This one deals to someone. Celine was very comfortable. She didn't care about living her life alone. She expected that she would be by herself, and she was determined to raise her kid, be a good mother, and be happy. But her night owl worry was change. It's like, how is change going to impact me? How's it going to impact my kid? I don't like change. I want things to stay consistent, to stay the same. Remember, she's obsessive compulsive personality. So she just wanted everything to just flow normally without a lot of ups and downs and changes, because she would fixate and obsess over those things that will cause her problems. So these are the kinds of night owl worries you want to appeal to. Think about that kind of thing when you're writing your book. If you have a book that does not appeal to a night owl worry of a reader, you're not going to have much of an audience. Okay, another tool that you want to consider is Incense. Incense is starting your book in the middle of the action. So when you start in Hater's Prayer, it's an introduction, but when they're in the middle of a podcast and Naomi is talking about being a hater, and your expectation is that the hater is a different person, but it's immediately engaging you because you find out that Naomi herself is saying she's a hater. And that's her first little, my name is Naomi Brooks and I'm a hater. And you're like, what? Wait a minute, what? So this is starting right in the middle of the action, or with a strong confection. That's what Incense is. In Wavering Lies, the second book in the Brainwaver universe, that book starts out Incense. It starts out with Balboa driving and a guy trying to kill her in a car. It starts out immediately with the action. So that's what Incense is. You want to engage your reader right away. I mean, you want to just snap them up before they can even get an idea of what they're reading, so that they're engaged and they're locked into the story, because now they want to know how this is going to be resolved. It's a great tool to use, and I urge you to use it. So either use a strong statement when you start. The Wavering Mind started with a character, Amanda, asking, do you believe in mind control? It's a setup, but it's an awesome setup because it's a powerful statement, and it's like, what? Mind control? Like, what do you mean by that? I want to know more about that. Okay. Foreshadowing and flashback. Guys, these are tools that I use. Flashback, be very careful how you use it. And remember, when you use flashbacks, you use them going into a flashback with, guys, oh, wow, I'm almost to the end, I promise. You use them going into flashbacks with two hads, two past statements, and you come out with two hads, so that your character is not confused about time in your book. Foreshadowing, of course, is that you hint at something to come. And that's always good to use, but only use it sparingly in your book. It's always good to use it in your book, just use it sparingly. Don't use it a whole lot. Just like I said, she had no idea what was coming next. That'll give the reader an idea that something's about to happen. So you want to hit it. But if you use foreshadowing, please have something come next. Don't have foreshadowing and then nothing happens, and then your reader's like, well, I mean, you sounded like you said something was coming, and it's not coming at all. This is stupid. Your voice is very unique. People say to me all the time, I write the way I sound or talk. Remember, your voice is unique, and how you use voice is very important as a writer, but make sure that when you use your voice, it's not judgy or preachy, and we'll get into that in nonfiction. Make sure that your point of view stays consistent in the book, guys. So that means that you're keeping yourself consistent with the point of view of this one character. So if I'm writing from Naomi's point of view, then I want to stay in Naomi's point of view. And if I transition from Naomi's point of view, I want to make that clear to the character or to the reader that I am moving out of Naomi's point of view into someone else's. I don't want to go back and forth between point of views. That gets very confusing for the reader. So I can't say, well, Naomi thought this and then Charlie thought that. I can't say that because, first of all, Naomi's thoughts are Naomi's thoughts. So I have to be in Naomi's point of view. Charlie's thoughts are Charlie's thoughts. So I have to be in his point of view. So if I'm shifting point of views like that, it's very confusing. So you'll see a lot of times in my book, it'll go Naomi, and then you'll see her point of view, and then it'll say a name at the top, like Sam or whatever, and then you'll see his point of view or whatever. Those are the examples I'm using. But that's the way my books are outlined, because that way the reader is not confused about whose point of view they're reading from. That's important. Research is important. Anything you do, you want to research it, guys, and do use more than Wikipedia, please. Research it because, again, you want well-rounded subject matter and you want to know what you're talking about. The worst thing you could do is write a book about someone who's an accountant and you don't know any accounting principles at all, and then the accountant reads it and they're like, that's not realistic at all. That's dumb. So do your research, get the information you need to make sure that it's very realistic and that it's true and that it's plausible. It doesn't matter if it's possible. Anything is possible. Make sure it's plausible. It's believable. Like in a normal scheme of things, that could happen. Okay, dear, let's move on into nonfiction. I've got 5 minutes and I'm going to open up for questions. So nonfiction, guys, nonfiction writers, I love nonfiction, guys. It's a good genre to get into. So let's be really quick about it. And I thank God that this area is quick. Next slide, Adair. Nonfiction is very simple. Okay. Know your subject matter and your opposing point of view. So you got to know what you're talking about and know what someone's going to argue it with. Know what you're going to present. Your idea that you're going to present, Jesus Christ is Lord. Know the point of view of somebody else. Jesus Christ is not Lord. Know your arguments and what you're going to counter against their arguments, because your entire book is set up to argue and claim that Jesus Christ is Lord. You want to know what people who are arguing against him would say. Okay. So you have to know your point of view and the opposing point of view in order to make your points. And not to say they say this, just to answer to that as you write. Next slide there. The next thing you want to do is, if you're doing a memoir, as a nonfiction, avoid redundancy. So many people use their journals to write from and tell their life story. So if you do this, do it in timeline form. This way you avoid repeating yourself over and over. The reader is easily bored. And once you lose a reader, you can lose a reader for life. I mean, you won't just lose them for the next paragraph. You'll lose them for life. Like they say your name on any book and they'll be like, she's boring. Automatically, just because of one chapter they read that didn't move them. You know what I mean? So make sure that you avoid redundancy, avoid repeating. And if you do repeat it, you say like I mentioned before. And so don't repeat the whole thing, but just kind of refer to or defer to it. Okay. Memoirs follow the plotting and conflict from fiction, right? Ideas. If your life story is boring, nobody will read it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. So outline your story like it's a fiction novel in order to keep your reader engaged. Okay, that's really important for those who want to write their life stories. If you're writing a memoir, you're writing your life story. Keep in mind you can see the three-act structure. Divide your life into those three acts. Then consider conflicts so they're properly placed. Think about your mirror moment, what you had to learn to or die in order for you to progress forward in life, and think about a big final action scene, because again, they don't read it to be bored. And the next slide, Adair, or is that the last one? Okay, yes, okay, so this is the next one. These tips for nonfiction: make it engaging, funny, or inspiring. Yeah, so we want to make it as engaging or funny, inspiring as possible. Use a number in the title. For example, 8 ways to enhance your praise and worship is awesome. Some type of way people love that kind of thing when they're buying nonfiction books. Tell a personal story or a story that engages or appeals to your reader. A lot of my nonfiction have stories in them that appeal to the reader. Be positive. Speak life to your reader. They have enough negativity coming at them every day from everywhere. Clear, concise steps that you have lived in order to put into practice, write about. The last thing that you need to do for your reader is to write a story or write a nonfiction that you haven't lived and have no idea what you're talking about. That helps no one. That assists no one. So that's basically our Writers Bootcamp, guys. It was very exciting to present this information. I'm sorry that I missed the opportunity to get a Q&A to you. So at any time, please feel free to contact me via email or my social media. I am Shantae M. James on Facebook. I am Shantae M. James on Instagram. I am MWCP and Media on TikTok, and I am MWC Midwest Creation 2 on Twitter. So contact me any way that you need to. My email is midwestcreationpublishing@gmail.com. And if you have any questions about writing, or and we do have from 2:15 to 3:15, 3 o'clock today. Everything. You are so welcome, Trina. We have every day or today, I'm sorry, 2:15 to 3 for you to be able to present or pitch any ideas for books, as well as talk about becoming a new author with MWCP and what that entails.